चित्तरत्न ग्रहणाय सम्यक् पूजां करोम्येष तथागतानां सद्धर्म रत्नस्य च निर्मलस्य बुद्धात्मजानां च गुणोदधीनां यावन्ति पुष्पाणि फलानि चैव भेषज जातानि च यानि सन्ति रत्नानि यावन्ति च सन्ति लोके जलानि च स्वच्छ मनोरमाणि व्यवदत् तेषाञ्च योनिरोध एवं वाग्दे महाश्रमणः द्वादशैर्गर्भिषा मुनिनो दृष्टा प्रतीत्य सम्भूता
Sorry, a little bit delayed. One, my bad habit is once I open my mouth, then blah, 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 continuously. So, some meeting, so I always talk. So, the chanting we already done yesterday. Now I think due to shortage of time, I'm not going to carry this chanting. Now, okay, that's one shloka. The praising to Buddha, wrote by Nagarjuna. Kange tusi nyeso ne tawa tunse pambe se tambe chene tense be kotam da la cha sa lo. So now, the text. The Bindu Jubdin Jiglapa Yusha. I think the 17 masters of Nalendra, the Shologa Tanguti, Tuang, the Deshache, Tuangi, Gomulugi, Tuang Taba Katunaba in Mawan Dameva, Sin, Tinjung Tam Rang, Double Zava said, so soon to us, at the ending Edele, Tinju Tam Donald Janzabes, or the Query.
And so, regarding the prayer to the 17 Nalanda masters, the first verse refers to it's a homage to the Buddha himself. Whenever this is in consonance with what Master Nagarjuna has done, whenever he wrote any texts, he always praised the Buddha for teaching dependent origination, that things are interdependently arisen, and therefore I too have done the same here.
Chimdendegi sum kasashuyagi ta ka tenu sum sachi lekjage on the chabayine tenu sum nala ta dudiare deva ka thamje nga gyuju chaba ta pali gi sum le ta tenu sum sen sumdo sa ta di zo di tarba drubji ta ngodi shiruglo chadiare shiruglo lae ene ribo mambu yebenane 다 대권은 시비 싫어 땡중그 대권은 시비 싫어데 다 타버주지 쏘드 되죠 다 타버주지 쏘를 하다 타버주지 다 시군입에 매버디 동이 다 차대요 남다 고슴스전 사진이 인도산에 디 쏘콜로 담벽거든네 다음에 따와 송여르지 이네 다 실차고 털이야 디세견다데 콜로 발발이 юм도리 다 юм도 된 뭐든 동의다 배동만도 수수면 나가 뭐든 동의가 뭐 지치고 싸울 때인데 루루도 와. 저들이 인도 개용 공도 타대 din이든 자디. 고불루 투모이 버지 담시 좀 된데 너나야 컨시 견에 게 대마게. 달라 개외런시 예만이. 견라 라래 칸데 동버셔 신이. 동버 런신 매바 런신 동버 임베 주지디 다른 자는 미니버리서 대삼매 송아 때는 딱 봐봐 사실 송도 와 사진의 인도 고불루족이 댄신들만 좋아하고 되는 동번이도 있어 되는 때는 딱 와도 되니 오면 라면 넣으시는다 고불루족부터 투모인 버직 짜이고도 와 댄중 그 대코는 있어야 사진의 인도 와다 이제 시작을 댄중 리수 삼면 시작해봐 사실
तो जहाँ तक अगर भगवान बुद्ध के दर्शन को देखा जाए जितने भी उनके वचन हैं बुद्ध वचनों को 3 पेटकों में रखा गया है चाहे ये संस्कृत परंपरा हो या पाली परंपरा दोनों परंपरा के लोग मानते हैं कि भगवान बुद्ध के वचनों
are sets of teachings called the three Pitakas in the Sanskrit also even including the Tantra the teachings on Tantra and the 3 collections of teachings of the Buddha are also found in the Pali tradition as well and What these three collections aim at is nirvana, liberation, and the method or the primary means to reach that goal of nirvana or liberation is wisdom, by using our wisdom. And especially here we are talking about wisdom, understanding the interdependent nature of things. And as it is said, that there is no second door to liberation other than this, the understanding of the dependent origination. And therefore, in the first turning of the wheel of the Dharma, the nirvana is taught, and then the more thoroughly it is taught in the second turning of the wheel of the Dharma, particularly the teachings of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. And therefore, Master Nagarjuna, following the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, also comments on the teaching of the Buddha, and therefore he says, and as the sutra says, what arises through conditions has no birth, and so forth. And Nagarjuna also says whatever is dependent on origin is said to be empty, and that is said to be designated, and that is the middle way. And so I'm praise Nagarjuna for that teaching on dependent origination.
Chani, that the kung, any do kung the chani, any dokunle do was that day, that and 단 남용 아주 따대야지. 따대네 낭쇼 거리야. 아니 성도 림. 야, 돌아오시.
हेलो तो नागार्जुन हालांकि माध्यमिक दर्शन के प्रणेता हैं.
With regard to the teachings of the writings of Master Nagarjuna, there are what are known as the 6 treatises of reasoning, such as the fundamental treatise of the middle way, and then the Ratnavali and so forth. And then he also wrote other texts such as Sutra Samuchaya, which in other words draws the quotations from the sutras. And then he also wrote the 5 stages of the Goyasamaja Tantra.
자야래 춘이 때와 조르게 떠서 쇼지 내가 전부도 와 떠서 이 페이지 콜로 타마 디시브 인분들 잡았다 보시샤 귤라마다 샤샤 페이지 집어 찾으려 그래
अन्य उनकी एक अन्य रचना है.
And then Master Nagarjuna also wrote texts which are called the collections of hymns or praises to the Buddha, and particularly it is very significant. A very significant text that he wrote is the Dharmadhatu Stova, and which is in praise of the reality of things as it is. And then this collection seems to be a commentary on the Tathagata Garbha Sutra, which is also the source text for Maitreya's Mahayana Anuttara Uttara Tantra.
스와네 자실 조도가 양나나 개인나 자상가 아니 야나 주의도 저여다 베남 코리아 재팬 디디 나가르주나 나가르주네다 또 아니 가다 가서 좀 오마 자실 교르체 병거 바보도 쓰다 이루지도 상월올이야 쉬우지다 개심보다 자심보다 이래
तो इनका ग्रंथ जो चावाशेरा
the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, another this text written by Master Nagarjuna, was translated into Chinese even as early as the 2nd century, and then through China it was also translated into Korean, Japanese, and Vietnamese languages as well. And therefore this text, the fundamental treatise of the middle way, the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, becomes a very important and very sacred text for these traditions.
조디 아리안 대화래. 저는 다 아리안 대회 송 다 개시주직이 오면 쉽게 봐. 대응하는 유덕이 와래. 30미 겨울에셔. 다 전에 오면 쉽게 봐도 자와셔로 시공도 버려셔. 저 최준 자면도 봐. 시공도 버쳐네. 자와셔 나리야. 또 아니 동리과 조송 다 아니 오면 쉽게베 고대 탑지 쳐지대 미다과래 송지 디드마다 잘 미다과 다 아니 동요 디드마다 송세 다 루루게 자셔고 샤고는 시르샤 삼심이 효리 다데네 아니 ngaso 거리야 아니 주주자야래 무슨 잡아 무슨 던지 주주 어서 떠요 다디리 대처부터 떠요
And then Master Nagarjuna's main disciple, the principal disciple, was Aryadeva, and Aryadeva's principal text that we study also is the 400 verses of the Middle Way, and yogic deeds. And this text is like a supplement to Nagarjuna's Mula Madhyamaka Karika, and therefore in these 400 verses Master Aryadeva has not written any salutation verse, but because it is considered as a supplement to the Mula Madhyamaka Karika. And of course the Mula Madhyamaka Karika teaches the emptiness, and then these 400 verses begins with the teachings on, as supplement, it begins with teachings on impermanence and so forth. And then in Tantra, he wrote Priyamela 5 stages of the Buddha.
Dache, Buddha Politasa, that day, Hajan Gabumeva, Taju Gabusha Marache, Yokshusto. They on the Dagari. That dinner been a chick, but I want to chick bear. Sergeant Shishanachi, any more need you to not, then attack, but more need you to that is security. It's 6 wishes to go into the Tanadi, more need you to not, teeny shark by chalkwares, then attack by Chisha, 60, that's huge in the Western.
And so then Master Buddha Palita was, next comes Buddha Palita, and he was a student of Nagarjuna Aryadeva, and one of the main disciples of them as well. And he wrote a text, which is a commentary to Mula Madhyamaka Karika by Master Nagarjuna, called Buddha Palita. The text itself was named like that. And then this is not a very long commentary, but it is a very terse commentary, and one of the main significant phrase or paragraph in the passage in this text says, if things were to have any inherent existence, then we can posit or we can posit them as such. But then, what is the need for the designation by called dependence?
Devashirutrame. Shirazaburisha, huge cashburisha. Not a toyoti. Lots of chigioti. So that dean nala any what is that? Yellow Umanimbu, rounded dog about che, huge shum dashburidua. Kandata dinner the bed, taste it to Gagi bed, drumda. Samalo the Goyore. So any Dasha Chen, Dolinan, talk about Umani with Sante the huge cash Marisha. Then it's our Shirogundava, Shirotami. Shirotami Nalia, Lobo Sanje Jangi, Sung Sheve, Yan Hasure, Sungdan Kashakatola, Lobo Lenge Kapotaya.
And then next comes Master Bhava Vivek, and of course he was also a disciple of the masters, and he wrote several texts such as the Madhyamaka Hridaya, the essence of the middle way, and to this he wrote his own commentary called the Tarkachivala, Blades of Reasoning, and then he also wrote the commentary to Mula Madhyamaka Karika, which is the jewel, the lamp of wisdom. And so we study these texts, and the Targajvala particularly is a text which touches on the different philosophical systems that existed in India, and it goes through these philosophical systems through arguments and analysis.
견셔버 드즈테디 베티야 직베 토롱 쇼를 다 톡주나니 한 레벨이셔 베거리시 모르셔 레벨 랭댕기 산제장기 그 슝카샤비야 그게 다 가버견셔버 디기 아니 저 루루고 고모 투모모이 버티디야 sad 신체 쉬우지 개셔버려도 와 엔다 드리인도 식세디 쉬우지 개셔버려 다디 로벨 랭댕기 저버시로 점에디에 타주 다치부도 와 아니 식세디 타주 다치부샤야래 한 레벨이셔 되네 나와서 런이기 데 우모주고 산제 자야래 다 자셔고 텐지도 우리 아니 자체주디야 샤공 서로 샤샤 들수 있도록 지금 우모주고 대랑제 대신도 아니 아리안데에 우모십제베 제바 다 뒤에 뭐나 전에다 우메슝 다 가서 올다 슝게다 슝게 또 뒤들이셔 슝게 개불 뒤들이셔 다 뒤에 아니 야오체 대베이나 지금 뭐냐 전에 저기다 우메베 공부시당 컨트시기요 봐 저는 원이 좀 매주 어디에 그다 즉 간다 각샤 봉송사디 토네 이 계속도 와 현루 각과 런루 샤과 다도 저거 방와스 전에 그들 마직 송셰 샤쇼 매베체 현루 각과 런루 샤과 다도 저거 방와스 각샤 봉송부터네 송셰 되게 답베데 거치 침벌래야지 쉬우셔도 와
The next comes Chandrakirti, and Chandrakirti, of course.
아니 상가데 상되베 저버 전세기 말 저주 저버 전세 자야래 대명이 나가兄弟 가셔도 더 좋대 가사 남주 샤스들이 야래 아니 남라 니들 남니 사라 사와 남니 식세다 전세니부터 사와니
And then Master Chandrakirti wrote these texts, which, of course, in which, such as the Prasanapada, the clear words or the elucidation of the words of Mula Madhyamaka Karika. And this is an explicit commentary to Mula Madhyamaka Karika by Master Nagarjuna, in which he actually counters the criticisms of Master Bhavaviveka to that of Buddha Palita's commentary. And because Buddha Palita criticized certain ways of interpreting of Buddha Palita of the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, which actually made clear how to reveal the very unique thoughts of Master Nagarjuna, and so it helped to make the Master Chandrakirti to make it clear what this unique thought of Master Nagarjuna are, and therefore he wrote this commentary, and he also wrote his own texts, which are again a kind of supplementary to Master Nagarjuna's Mula Madhyamaka Karika, in terms of its vastness of the practices of Bodhisattvas, and the vast practice of Bodhisattvas, which is the Madhyamaka Avatara, introduction or entry into the middle way, and then its own commentary, auto commentary by him. And so these, and on top of that, he also wrote a commentary on the 400 verses of Master Aryadeva. And so if we study these texts, it's going to really help us to understand the unique system of the Madhyamaka Prasangika thought. And we study these texts, and these are the very like the kings of texts, treatises on Madhyamaka. And then Chandrakirti also wrote the Clear Lamp, which is a commentary to the Guhyasamaja Tantra.
가사 주주 자 랍주니부디 다 시월에 송 샹다요 유기르데다 조 랍주니부들이샤 다 대응한다 남주 따와 때되게요
तो फिर इसके बाद आचार्य
Chandadeva, and he wrote these two texts, the Brahma and the compendium of practices and Bodhisattvacharya Avatara, and there may be other texts that he wrote, but these are the texts that we usually study as well.
That issue de 가서 쉬어야기 얘는 두릅 개변을 다 10월에 두릅 개변을 주물서도 와 그러다 두릅 개변을 다 안들디 kenshi shiwo tsuyo turu kyebe nangi. Kita kyeba chenpo chene. Da kongi duje kamshi nidung ume lams. Zawa chigu ume da pasuri pake jungda mao che. Yang nangsegi yang namrikbe dawa de yang shenshi. Yang kong de ene nalende Kaba sosu yang renglu de susage yang peke deba nanga ji redo wa de deni indu bo kaso peke kaba dandana ne deisi de de nalende kaba dandana ne mentas ji so deni indu pheji umabozu any 치든 생에게 우모버직다 치든 미싱에게 우모버선다 도시와 체험도 로벨랭데 치든 세겐데 로벨 쇼즈 치든 미싱에 다 도시와 체험도 디니가로 타냐도랑 제 세겐지 다 도시하래 저다 kenji 쇼즈 우모제 다 랑데 쇼르다 시라 몽고도 야마레 간다 우모견 랑제드 잡아. 되네 개치슈지 공기 아니 세메숑 로빈 초랑 쳐다기 대사를 제라 아니야 지금 무틱베 지금 참아마와 그다음 참아봤던 얘기야 지금 그게 토론 여다부터 제라 아니 쉬워서 세메 대코는 뒤에 나라 야 뒤에 봐 드셔겠네 그게 돌링 잡아 나셔봐 할 레비스도가 사진 어딘지요 그래 저랑 메디 이 우체 릭순 제게 봐서 우모다 우메 아니 떠도다 아니 세메숑 로슨 제체 되도가 삼기 미치게 개발했어 아니 카외 종수 개된 벤자 봤으니 공별이야 최제 거진 전기 대주나 아니 로빈 두지 전기 차로난체 아니 kenshi shiwotsu da 별이야 사지가 땜바디 다 뭐냐 자네게 그게 날렌데 착수 치머시신지 이랬어요 되체 드리버리
Then next comes Master Shandarakshita. Just as Shandideva lived in the 8th century, Shandarakshita also was someone who lived in the 8th century. And he was a great scholar, someone who actually followed the Madhyamaka philosophical school or system, as well as combining it with the Vijnanavada, the mind-only school system as well. And therefore, he was also a founder amongst the Nalanda masters, the Nalanda scholars. He was one of the topmost scholars who actually founded his own philosophical school, which is called the Vijnanavada, or the mind on the Savatantrika Chittamatra school. And within this Savatantrika Madhyamaka school, there are two systems, two sub-schools. One is that which was founded by Bhaviveka, in which they expound the externality of things. They accept or assert that things do have external existence, whereas Chandarakshita's system, because of following the Chittamatra system, he denies any externality to things. But then both these systems also assert that things do have conventional self-characteristic existence as well. And so he wrote texts like Madhyamaka Alamkara, or Ornament of the Middle Way, and then also he wrote the text on logic and epistemology called Tatov Samgraha, which is a text that it actually follows up on the after the Master Dhammakirti's death, the different logic and epistemological systems that still evolved in India after the death of the Dhammakirti. And so I wrote in this praise, I call to mind the Bodhisattva Chandarakshita, who introduced the middle way to suit the disciples' mental dispositions. Disciples' mental disposition was well versed in expounding the rationale of the middle way and the valid cognition, and disseminated the teaching of the conqueror in the land of snow. So he was responsible for spreading the Buddha Dharma in, and particularly the Madhyamaka system, and together with the epistemological system in Tibet.
The page.
इसमें टेबल ऑफ कॉन्टेंट लिखा हुआ है, तो नीचे द फ्रेज ऑफ द 17 ग्रेट नालंदा पंडित, इसको आप देखिए, हिंदी में और अंग्रेजी में दोनों में है.
On these texts, in these texts, but the
시워서 다 기초 쪼르샤 공기 아니 다 우마견게 전적소로 저거리 우마 나와서 자도가 시우지 개쳐버려 베지디 시우지 개쳐버려샤 우마 나와서 다데네 공기 기계 시워서 참여 대코는 뒤에 슝디기 잡아 가서다 뼈니지도가 가다 저 개버지도 한 레벨에 차고 시작해나 다 잠재니부터 장 대변이나 차고 시작도라 계속 시작해서
तो इसके बाद
and then comes Master
혈lepem니 아니 화상되는 님돌이야 다 하상을 리니도 kenji shiwosu ni shube kodo ne hashang toga samya ya is the miyu samden rings dina no zo gom zo chingen chi di ko chanden cha de yore dene chi su yang hashang ane gomba zo chaba ma do shirdo namji gi shiru be ji tösam gwa ma re sa chi da zhe ji go gom jang jang de ge sa chi 들게서 이네 자나 그냥 디 다섯 첨부래 니혼안에 디 다섯 첨부도 나까지 니혼을 예배하도리야 내가 같이 저청에 좀 아니 배셨다고 그래스 아니 검거리 접선 되게 말베스 어디를 생각해도 저서 그 제시고 검 코나마도 지금 태선을 찾고 매버지 근데 증인시 왔다 자상가 든지기다 두수 증에게 하샤들의 종이 달려야 아니 로로 까말을 실래 아니 저거 괜찮아 다 디슈 급대 아니 벽이 전부 취소돼 생기 아니 주류는 저거 괜찮아 흉대주 대지 이걸 막 거변하네 지금 나라나 선에 선집 쉬니 고문 통다 봐좀디 최적 흉물로 쓰이제 제도가 별하래야 이 별한다 제가 쓰지 야가 저다 말다 나도 별에 된다래요
And so next comes Master Kamalashila, who was a main disciple of Master Chandarakshita. He came to Tibet at the invitation of the Tibetan king, Kitesung, and he wrote the Madhyamaka Aluka, the lamp or the light of Madhyamaka, and which is a commentary, sort of a commentary, meaning explicating the meaning of Madhyamaka Alamkara by Master Chandarakshita himself. Then he also wrote the Samgraha Panjika, which is, in other words, a commentary on the difficult points of the Samgraha by his master Chandarakshita as well. And so both these texts, the root text written by Chandarakshita and the commentary by Kamalashila, are very, very difficult texts to understand, to comprehend the meaning. And this Panjika has even two volumes in the Tibetan style of books. And after coming to to Tibet at the invitation of the Tibetan king, he actually had a debate with some Chinese Hoshangs or Chinese monks who were at Samye monastery at the time. And of course, in the beginning, the Chinese masters were good, the standard and practitioners and authentic practitioners and scholars. But then later, they developed some kind of idea amongst the Hoshangs that only meditation is enough and no study, elaborate, extensive study is not needed. And therefore, I mean, this system still exists in China as well as Japan. And I once was in Japan where people asked me, is it really necessary for us to study? It's not meditation, not enough. And so such people did appear, and therefore Kamalashila was invited to debate. And he wrote the Bhavana Krama for the Tibetans, not Indians.
The Kasa Samutawe Kibadi. That didn't mind any Daji Jugu. That didn't mind Chenita Toma Shingde Sunji. Any Dachever Lamjir Bopagita, Sour Zenge, Shingde Sunji, Papa Tommy Che. That Kongi, any Kasadi Mobakundu. Any Kongi that Chambeda Gazoreta, the Chamber Sung Sugarmenta, Chinsus about Chambongo in the Sung to Dushava, Chamjitanga. Che any corner running that or Kazota, other that is Shazana Yaushimeta. Takada in it, Mobakundu, Mobokoma in Zayade. That the name Kongi, Gucci, any Lobini, Kava Chimburi, Chenny in Kongi, any that when the young round, the Mobazu, Chenny, that the Mobokoni said it. Timingi in the Samsambeda, double down the Pave, any chicken, Sunjubata, Nishubata, not the Zete, Zatwa. Dealing on the Toyota.
And then comes Master Sangha, who was, I mean, in the Tibetan tradition, we talk about the two lineages or traditions. There's the profound lineage of the profound view and the lineage of the extensive practices. And so up to this Charya Kamalashila, we have more or less covered those masters belonging to the profound lineage system of the view. And then from Asanga, we have basically the lineage of the extensive practices. And so he was the founder of the Chittamatra system, and also the master who founded or started the extensive lineage of practices of Bodhisattva practices, and he is called the charioteer of this system. And he wrote texts such as Abhidhamma Samuccaya, and which is considered the higher or an Abhidhamma text. And then his younger brother Vasubandhu wrote Abhidhamma Kosha, which is considered as a lower Abhidhamma text. And then he also wrote collected the Maitreya's 5 treatises as well. So although I don't know much about these texts, but Master Vasubandhu also wrote other texts such as the Trimshatika and Vimshatika and so forth.
Kesho Yingya, the Kusho Chambuche, that thing in Trachishima Karma, more cheese and sugar.
Master Vasubandhu, of course, in his Abhidhamma Kosha, has written or described about the cosmos as it is found traditionally in our text. And so with due respect to him, I seek his permission not to not to accept his presentation of the Mount Meru and so forth.
Then Temen Chibuche dos Drotigari, in the Timbu Channel was sending. Any chijun dini, Baksa Nuchik the chess, any Nimati, Dawale, Baksa Chik Chamado, and Shas, the Chawasum. That did that triggers a chick. Gangshida, Chick did to see Javidus, that is a marrow. That Ninda needed chijun shivjo. Tang as make the design, chijun chip, so Shasharam, Camero, they got Nima shoes targo. The light year. 시우스당에 아주 점심 친구들이 시우스 타는 거래. 나 타냐 그래. 이게 미인 로토고 그래. 봐. 정말 점지 진짜 셔지게. 패션 로빈이 짠샤나 사브나체. 또 이 timbe 님도 tim니 도스 그게 사람한테 이렇게도 시디. 다 나왔다 님은 이거지. 님은 timbe 참아도 샤나 잡아 민도 빠지 고니. 근데 니들 좀 붙여놓고 박생거 주지도 제사 손도 봐. 저들이 이르사네. 네? 가수시오는 시리. 반 알렌데 추준쟁에게 좀전을 때는 리베치 하는 드라마도 롱딩 말아. 저들이 이르사네. 네 자치지 막 말라나. 난괴체는 표야 그냥 그렇게 요 말해.
तो जैसा कि अभी कहा
So Master Vasubandhu in his Abhidhamma Kosha has mentioned that he describes the cosmos with this Mount Meru, Sumeru in the center, and then with it surrounded by the 4 continents and then subcontinents, and then there are the sun and the moon going around the Mount Meru itself, and it said that the height of the sun and the moon is there's only a difference of 1 yojana, and that the sun is, and then he says the sun is bigger then the sun and the moon are actually rotating around going around the Mount Meru at the same height, and he says the sun is 1 yojana bigger than the moon. And so, but it's not true, because if we use the modern technology and telescopes and so forth, very powerful telescopes, we can see actually the size of the moon correctly, and there's calculations can be done by using the light year and through the usage of the light year measurements and so forth. And so this should not be taken literally. And I jokingly sometimes say that Vasubandhu, when he wrote the Abhidhamma Kosha, Karika, he must have looked at the moon and the sun, and his vision must have not been very clear, and then the sky must not have been also very clear. And so he said there's only a slight difference between the size of these two heavenly objects. And so we should not, of course, as followers of the Nalanda tradition, we are not necessarily necessary to accept things literally, and therefore, if we don't accept the Mount Meru existence of Mount Meru and so forth, it doesn't contradict us as being still a follower of the Nalanda tradition and Buddhism.
서버도 자체에 고만 대세경이 되잖아요. 다도 세외团에 애니마 대세 먹고 숨이 되잖아요. 단 로빈 초지랑부 애니 참매숑 치라고 지다. 참군이 되버 참매숑 먹고 공자이 버려. 근데 주다 되네. 참군이 되버 자체. 다 삼지 미쳐버렸어. 다 참군이 되베 애니 던지서로 애니 단 데바이스 시초를 했다 가다 애니 로빈 최다 다 참아 남지 조르기베다 참아 대준사디 자바레 애니 류테베 던지 숨 처바양라테베 던지 시체네 참아 대준사디 디르 차상로 백을 교도가 개인을 줄면도 개인을 로빈 초랑게 리고 개인을 줄샤 마도신 참외숑 줄면도 다지네 인도산에 참외숑 산제베 배나는데 개베 아니 셰스 참외과디 패지 별다 다 약쇼르샤 셰 하나면도가 아니 별 정리기다 개바 들어 죽으면 알아야 사편도 공거 견쟁기 아니 랑좀 아니 참 리그리스야지 제도가 다 되네마 아니 차바 최신 로빈 차바 최신 yap세네마 아니 딱사기 지금 도단도 때 몽구지 패지 삽도 나요서래 대체는 다 간다 산제베 다 롱고디 이디기 나네 패지다 벤나는데 아니 캐베 제셰베 체메숑 차산지 두르샤바다 아니 조어서도 마세베 체메숑로 롬니 시부지기다 슉tem도 롬니 나게디 패지 바바치고 그러셔
And then next comes Master Master Dignaka. And so with regard to here, we are starting with the tradition of logic and epistemology. And of course, Master Nagarjuna, in his text, used a lot of logic, which is called usually the reductio ad absurdum logic. And whereas Bhaviveka used more formal logic, where you use where you have a topic and then a predicate and then a reasoning. And so there are these kind of different logics that were called I mean, we, the Tibetans, have the best kind of system of study of logic and following these texts is amongst the Tibetans, and then amongst the Tibetan masters such as Sajja Pandita also wrote his own text on Pramana, and then Chabachuja Sengye and so forth also had done this their own, I mean, innovated logical debates and so forth.
Nina Zanyare, Tengo Tagiare. Shung Halevishtoa. And the Shude, Lover Sanji Kasa, Lover Sengasangu. Any Gadon were done there, Shijin, Jana. Shata Zo Didrisha, that Didi, that Mondo Gang and Deva, Purdushim Didri, and the Deva Tense. Do it done any Mondo Gang and Deva Tense. Then also Monguchi Lolly Simgiara, any Didi, and Numulomnicha. Zor shadore. And Persian shung de zorisha. Pergi kaba gashek distunusunguyore. Persian da the Yumshirji Pardo Chimbeta, Badungondo Saranzanga, shung zo shadorba. So the name is the Persian shung zoche, zawache. Umadi Persiangi, Dudruche. Nam dan duo de Persian logiche. The Persian Tangdinche and Samadi Persian Riglamche or putting Ajalo, Zaw any Persian Yada, Persian Gita Yamata Sungche or Dur Sungsuya, the Persian Temperta. What is it?
Then comes Master Vimukti Sena. Vimukti Sena was a disciple of Vasubandhu. Vasubandhu's disciple, and then not following the system of, although Master Vasubandhu was his master, and Master Vasubandhu was following the Chittamatra system, but then he deviated from his masters in terms of the philosophical position, and so he followed the Madhyamaka system of called philosophical system, and therefore he wrote his commentary on the Abhisamaya Alankara from the point of view of the Madhyamaka system, and so he wrote this. The lamp of the 25,000 verses of Prajnaparamita Sutras, and we do study this in our monastic institutions. And then next comes the Haribhadra, Master Haribhadra. He also wrote this Prajnaparamita Abhisamaya Aloka, and so which is a commentary to the Abhisamaya Alamkara and the 8,000 verses of the Prajnaparamita Sutras. And so these two texts are considered to be the most excellent commentaries on Abhidhamma Samuccaya. And then Master Haribhadra also wrote his short commentary, which is called The Clear Meaning and of Abhidhamma Samuccaya. Abhisamaya Alamkara as well. And so some Tibetan texts, so in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, we have the study of what is known as the study of the Prajnaparamita. And so within this, some scholars say that the study of Prajnaparamita is the body, like the root text, and then the Madhyamaka is like its view, philosophical view, and then the Vinaya, the monastic system, as the precepts of this, and then Abhidhamma Kosha as the enumeration of the numbers of practices and so forth, and then the Pramana text as the logic for the study of Abhisamaya Alamkara.
Due dene geta ene lobe yondewe ene deise de kiru so ene lobe shakyewe chane oda dini budi due shung oda kada pege da shung duon dozawa ene da 다가는 시기 에너지 두어 자체를 서 도서 제니 다 별이야 다 뒤에 베스다 저것도 뒤서는 되게 하네
And then up to this point, Haribhadra, what we have covered is we have actually covered the text within the three Pitakas. We have covered those texts which are commented by these masters pertaining to the Sutra collection and then the Abhidhamma collection. And then the third collection is the Vinaya collection of teachings. And so with regard to this Vinaya text, now we have masters like Gunaprabha, who actually wrote his own text called Vinaya Sutra, and then also extensive commentary to the Vinaya as well. And so all these texts are studied in the Tibetan Buddhist monastic universities.
다드네 애니 조지 어다디리 삽게가 남지를 버디디기 뭐 딴도 찍으라 다 냠술 린주고 애니 기부숨지 남지를 버 찍니 송샤지 다디 벼 강쟁의 정로 송버리 제니 벼다 들어 죽지버 저것도와 애니 간다변 지다벼 계적 용서로디 지 산제배 최신의 차대어라 봐 저다 산제배 최버지 시샤 전에 송셔버지 레샤 저들인도 저 남중 qab리야 다 기부숨 그 아다 럼rum 타나 마 지금 송야 돼 딴도 지글다 다 가서 우리 그게 자신 주규도 사무도규 슝들이 되게 장바 여등의 지기 실시하네 애니 되지겠다 딴도 지글 마 냠네 제단 고 송셔버 진도산에 타주기 타주기 슝 깨보게 민도가 어디 뜻이 자샤 전에 다 빈주 주든 안에 kenji shiwocho ane ane lobe pemen ngansu takada kasa chugudi shandara shida ane kamala shila ane addition dibumgara didi pelda pe da kala pedevichi da disumjalo nyangalen dasa pel nyangalen deverisha 자상하다 날린다다 투모모 입에다 저와야 단다 ene nalende chugyu tibabata yindande doksre
फिर उसके बाद अंतिम
And then next comes Master Adisha, who is called Jo Adisha, the Venerable Adisha. And he wrote, after coming to Tibet, he wrote this text called Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, which is a text which teaches about the practices pertaining to the three types of beings, of the three capacities. And so it was written in Tibet for Tibetans, because Tibet by that time had become a Buddhist land, and therefore he wrote this text particularly for the audience who were already Buddhist practitioners in Tibet. And so there is not much arguments, like analytical arguments, in this text, the Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment. And so it was just presenting the practices of the extensive called the lineage and the profound lineage as well. And then these three masters, Master Chandrakshita, Kamalashila, and Master Adisha, were three Indian masters who followed the Nalanda tradition, Nalanda Monastic Education and University, and who came to Tibet and also died in Tibet. And therefore, I usually say the Tibetan Buddhist tradition is a unique tradition that follows a unique Nalanda tradition, and it's an authentic follower of the Nalanda tradition as well.
가담 추주직세 애니 치수 가담 살마스체네 기록 추주직세 다가도 조 애니 닝마 애니 거주 사자 애니 가담 선이 니스체네 와다 드리직자 추주 시설지 안 낭색 파치나 먹고 사요래 디제디 패저 나게 숨기타네 애니 주진 소소소 맨다맨다 챤네 애니 규디 맨다 근데 자 제소장네 애니 주진 소소소 다 명한 마도 나샤샤샤 근데 타네 애니 맨다맨다 여대버지 패지르샤 대 탐절로기 변주 주든기 슝 소디디 가나 패지 삼아 찍거래 자 근데 인도 별 관식이 취규디 날랜데 취규스라나 사기까지 삼원을 되나 튀리기도 와 다 자야 날린다는 말 규대베 아니 슝진디디 바다 지슝들이 이내다 디바치랑 뭐세내서 소리체 아니 주진 소소소마 대셔버 진짜진데 마 균형도 전에 에노 사기까지 만다 차대버지 아니 거주 차샤네 낭식이 아니 거주 치시 충계선 독사이 먹고도가 다가는 시그 사자를 차샤네 상어 살숨 다가는 시에네 가담을 차샤네 에네 가담 슝바와 럼림바 맹아바 근데 괜찮은 차샤네 에네 세규 완선인주 에네 유지 슝바 도스는 메다메다 되기도 그래서 낭세게 에네 규지经过 메다메다 토네 메다메다 되는 거고 자 저리 이르잖아요 지 규디 지디 패지 강사 거전 세하게 대전하라 패지 샤투야래샤 슝진디예디 안다 베르 줍중기 슝진디예디 템파 지젠세하데 공로 패지래샤 규디디예디 강사 제다고를 지금 사과사 애는 모습에다 셰시 친로톱 디디가 토네 마 연데 버지 레도가 다 슝첨디예디 템파 지 남샤바 땅에 온도는 자셔 있으나 그 템퍼 지제나 차도가 그래서 강사 거생하는 만들고 저는 아니 딱견에 타야 버지 배는 규리샤셔는 규 타야 버지도가 그래서 이제 인도 치기 벽이 개발 것이게는 송야래야 이제根据 부드숨져서 예다 가다 조다 어디를 나려야 템퍼 지제 온도 쳐버지 강사 거생 온도 쳐버지 니 채나 아니 세우슈 차는 것도 어디 아무도 서다 간다 지금 사기건이 탐저로 전화 어다 탐저로 되네마 배날린데 추유로 뚝셔버 찍거래 켄지 시워서도 뚝대버 찍거래샤 켄지 시워서도 로드를 무시로 뚝대버 찍거래 어디 되시도 어다디 자상어 두스 그 처음에 지그 가서를 그게 즉 슝데 또 연데 아니 참으로 배 나는데 주주 직교 간대도 시 제가 소소간 집에 있는 아니 냐만데 냐도 지금 대비시 통용 이지직 지시에 대비시 친구들이 벽에 친구 아니 디나래 그 직지 지자 아니 롱버를 라마를 출루를 써야지 지요 어디 야로 도저래 아니 롱버를 라마를 출루면을 송세 아니 일본도 와도 와 거버소소 추기면은 맨다식 송되기도 와 그래서 푹 됐을 가는 시작 뭐치면서 아니 그도 거버도 되지기다 남주지 송대하고 지간 로데리 아니 거 맨다식 되는 거래 그 자나로 사샤는 3대바 특징바这用这个多啊但日本사샤네 지금 3대바는 공장에서 아니 슝신다 되기도 봐 근데 실은 이거 마동에게 야 나빠지도 봐 대신 먼저 돼 실은 이거 때문에 봐 공조시 신경이 지금 산다 들으야지 거기 퇴제 슝더를 했어 지금 슝 용조 고마샤체 아니 슝치라고 야 심체 딘로된 게 좀 저기 산들이 인도 간다 지금 자외 아주다 나른달이었고 대 탐자로 나른달의 기분이 찍버려 루루 캐멜링의 수식이 말해 근데 인도 루루랑 기타 슝디들 콩뚱는 로가야 돼 뺏겨져 버렸어 근데 인도 벤죽 주든 사데 내가 접을 수 통하는 것도 어두시 안데 대학교와 몽고야 다 이게 슝 몽고 시장도 별려 떡이야 돼 다 이제 사상에 듣고 되는데 봐 저 쫓아야 돼 아니 가서 배 세버실로나 배 캐바디 이딩 자시베 슝디 나를 또 규율 좋아래 진짜 나 삼단 예서지 셰블로 로단다 대주제 3년 밑에 요아래 아니 참여중 사샤네 아니 가사디 아 야우시 챙기면도 어다 간다 이니 지금 캐버 몽구도가 다 디디 엔디나 거트야 말에 간다베 벤 나는데다 캐버 몽구 쉬어지기다 슝 벽에를 주셔 되는 떡이야래 야 다들 사셔 다들만 다 오머지 정원이다 인 베시시 쇼 오머지 정원流탕不停
इसके बाद
then within the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, we actually divide the dissemination of Buddhism in Tibet into two, the earlier and the later dissemination of Buddhism in Tibet. And so the earlier dissemination refers to teachings which spread during the times of the kings Chesung Detsen, Guru Padmasambhava, and Master Chandarakshita. And from then down to until the time when Master Atisha came to Tibet. And that was at a time when the Tibetan translator Lorchen Rinchen Sangpo and also lived in that era. And so from Lorchen Sangpo down, then we can see that the later or new dissemination of the Buddhism in Tibet, and with the coming of the Atisha. And therefore we have the Nyingma tradition, which follows the earlier dissemination, and the tradition that comes in the early dissemination. And then in the later dissemination, we have the Kagyu Sajya, Kadampa, which started after Atisha came to Tibet. And then we also have the later development of the Geluk system, which is also called the Kadam, new Kadam tradition as well. And so, of course, these are the many sub-schools within each. So most probably the difference between these different amongst these schools, it has to do with the dissemination of the tantric teachings, which by emphasizing on a certain particular tantra, and also by emphasizing on the pith instructions of certain Mahasiddhas of India who followed those tantras. And then we have these different Tibetan Buddhist schools, and all of these too of course have to must go back to the Nalanda tradition as well, and therefore Tibetan Buddhist tradition is in the pure Nalanda tradition. As I usually say, but then when we go into the subdivisions within each school, which follow emphasize different tantras and different with instructions of the Indian Mahasiddhas, then we have within the Kagyu system the 4 major and 8 minor schools, and then Sakya has the Sakya, Ngorpa, and Tsarpa, and then within the Kadam school there are those of the Kadam Shungpawa, the scholastic tradition, then the Lamrim, the Ba, or the stages of the Pa tradition, and then the pith instruction lineage of Kadam tradition as well, and then the later Kadam tradition, or the Sarma, the new Kadam tradition, also is divided into Segyu, Empa, and Ansa, and the central scholastic tradition as well. And so all these different Buddhist traditions that spread in Tibet go back to when it comes to studying this classic text written by the 17 Nalanda masters, it's all these traditions follow the same tradition, same study of the same text, and so these classic texts written by the 17 Nalanda masters, could be considered to present the Buddha Dharma in its broad structure, the overall structure of Buddha Dharma, and covering the entire structure of the Dharma, and as such. And then when it comes to emphasizing on the tantric practices, then those traditions could be said to emphasize on a very particular specific practices that are meant for very particular disciples as well. And so there are accordingly many different visions that happened to the great masters, Mahasiddhas, and accordingly they gave their own instructions, their own commentaries, and so forth. And therefore we have all various, numerous kinds of texts that are found in this visionary texts that are meant for very specific disciples, and which not necessarily give the broad structure of the overall complete structure of Buddhism as such, but very specific practices meant for specific disciples. But we have to know that we need to have the broad structure of Buddhism, the entire structure of Buddhism, Buddhist practice. And then and so some later Indian Tibetan masters have said that within the tradition, within the practices that have, or the teachings that have spread in Tibet, we can divide these into two: those which present the broad structure of the entire structure, the complete structure of Buddhism, and those that were meant for very specific disciples as well. And so all these, what we are saying here is that in the Sakya, Nyingma, Kagyu, Gelug, and even Chonang tradition, follow the Nalanda tradition, because they all follow the practices that were handed down by Master Chandarakshita and Master Padmasambhava, who were invited to Tibet in those days. And then we can trace back to them as well. So
단다 상부 시우치 단 인구수 되는잖아요. 먼저 주야게 저거직 내리 주야게 저거직 단 내리 주야 저거지 나로라 내리 인지 방배 탈바점 주야직 아니 내리 저번이가 방배 탐제 캠페 고방 주야 디디마 차상 지송되도
तो रत्नावली का पहले अध्याय में खासकर
So was Master Nagarjuna's Ratnavali, that precious garland, actually is a text that was instructed. It's an epistle to his friend King, who was called Gautamiputra, and in this text, what he actually touches on is this the practices that lead us to higher rebirth, and then those practices that lead us to higher excellence or the definite goodness. And so within the later, there are two divisions: the leading to the highest status or higher excellence, which is mere freedom from the destructive emotions, and then also the highest excellence, which is a freedom from total freedom from all defilements, including the cognitive obscurations.
상제 좀 된데 컨디지레스나 아니 예복군의 남들 신 방배 연대 연대 군기 겸보 보스던 독배 연대 디 방독의 연대 딘디지기 용야 고야 조에니 심지기 왕기 용고야지 대레레 년주 sampanla chanju sem 그 고요 말에 시리 panla 동이 독배 싫어 삼게 미쳐봐 아니 동이도 싫어디 탑지 넘버 군단다 봐 근데 그 넘고 총대기 동반이 있어 대권배 또 어네 근데 또 동이도 싫어디 시주군이 붙이기 어래 근데 이 인도산에 예버 군래 줘야 돼 동력이 따와 전주 없으면 있으면 고도와 다 연대군이 잡아 보셔야 돼 현대 배밀 흔주 영향이 가다이네 연대디 조에는 전주 없으면 돌아다네 연구하러 와 근데 인도 심진군이 년지부 사대기 전주 없으면 돼 스페치 송교서래 다 대안에 짬르 남샤 다 뭐냐 전에 그 섭슈디 로빈 초랑기 참아 근두기 최주들이샤 참아를 겨봐 돌아 펜셔봐 덤버 대시 격 선송샤디 시부지기 슝 다쳐버려도 좀 된데 참에 기부레스 나란 소리야 랑도가 내 땡엘라 랑도가 내 땡에기 아니 덤버치레스 대니 콩게 있는 랑도가 내 땡셔 디디베 가서 우리 그 루어메 버치 근데 인도산에 드르르베네 담바티 세메 기부레스 어느 세메 기부데 아니 지금 딱 바라는 중국 기부터 우리 베스도나 마레스 마지바는 독든도 주버니 숨센 주르바 사 책되기 대대베 세메 기부 줄여야 돼야 주드께 럼니 아니 타르 참을 주버레스 참을 주고 차버레스 딱와를 주고 주고 말레스 원아 참을 주고 주드께 때네 아니 참을 주고 주버이나 아니 디 주드께 가려서나 돌아 펜시바 사대고다 되리 창조습니다 타지도 돌아 패버시베 투지션부터 주지 투지 컴레데 송샤게 투지션부터 더 대왕게 아니 타예베 심지 타다라 그게다 펜드 주야게 아니 닝도께 다 대터줄려 럽 다오나 난게테르베 심지라 그게 펜드 주야 지 영알라 아니 랑게 간다 아니 방도 다르시면 고고요 아래 조조 그러다 아니 방배 연대 쟁에게 니부터 된 거고요. 아래. 그 담배도 싫어들으셔. 어디에 인도산에 간다에네 똑같이시사. 다 똑같이 규네 이 커뮤니티산에 에네 레벨 방법을 써봐. 방법듯이 주는 거지. 근데 인도 참으로 줘 봐. 돌아 펜셔 봐. 어다 담바 샤라 랑도네 조조 땡중 그 대권원이 라오거나 다 참여 중앙 디스 측디 예매매신데 땡중사 예매매신데 딱 간다 땡중 그땀 라오거는 더버즈베 담발라나메 봐 간다 땡들이 담바 영야디 조 담에도 왜 싫어 내가 이제 타성 공순자네 배 영화 타로 두고지 다 총 연구 요에 인도산에 담바세야 되기 담에도 왜 싫어 드셔야 대라 때네 아니 방도 드시도 주는 거리스 똑같이다 방법듯이 주는 거리스 참을 기본 돌아 펜셔고 담바 대식 대대비 연장가와디 아니 개발하는 거 버리스 참을 기본 돌아 펜셔고 담바 대식 겨 사디 다 되기 십전 대셔디 로빈 쳐다기 아니 참한 남지 류니베 나라 아니 롱중기 샤바직 루도기 샤바직 롱중기 샤바걸로 택신수 남진 주야도 조시소 루도기 샤바커돌이야 아니 가서 그게 내리 탈벽고만 주야 디디 송체 할 레벨도 링부 修行。다 디강은 이제 오면 따와 땡중사게 때는다고 땡중사 디디강은 내는 집에이나 에노 다 시담바니 람탑시니 저부꾼이 다당엔 티샤트기 선들나로 여번는 신기 시 대니기 남샤 야오지 또 우마비슝의 소원은 신기 대니기 남샤 야오지 디스크세나로 요래 대니기 남샤 야오지 셰바이나 에네 균제기 땡중 로메오 통돼야지 될 때네 에네 가자 그는 유문 초기 균제다 남장 초기 균제디들 배 예봤다 돼야지 대단해 에네 구조수 못 쳐야지 너야도가 사들이 이번에 다 슝디디 슝지부 그냥 저 슝지부 다가 뒤에 찍어면 배치 슝공어디 도 스트레니 대바이나 뭐나 전에다 배 네버 토야지다 아니 산제가 쇼를 신의 대바 토와야지 다시 용토야 되셔 어디지 어디 인도 어디 최주되게 전다 같이 뭐 싶으시도 와
So in the Ratnavali, go from the front, please. So regarding the Ratnavali, the Master Nagarjuna says, I bow down to the omniscient, freed from all defects, adorned with all qualities, the sole friends of all beings. So here, with regard to the lines, the second, third, and fourth lines, we can understand it. I mean, in the first line, to refer to the Buddha being fully omniscient means that he's called free from all defects means that he has overcome all the shortcomings, both the destructive emotions as well as the cognitive obscurations, which hinder us from seeing everything as it is. And therefore, he has this omniscience within himself. And then, in order to attain such a goal where you are free from all kinds of defects and shortcomings or defilements, and we need to. I mean, what we need is the understanding of emptiness, the view of emptiness, coupled with bodhicitta, this altruistic intention to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. And so, with these two combined forces, then you can overcome all one's defilements within oneself, and then become an omniscient one. And so. In this way, he becomes someone becomes a Buddha, an omniscient one, and therefore he becomes an authoritative person to teach others from his own experience what he has gone through, from his own experience without relying on others as such. And therefore, in order to prove that the Buddha is an authoritative person, an authority, and having the full knowledge of everything. And Dignaga has written in his Pramana Samuchaya that with regard to the Buddha, he says that one who has become authority or a valid person and who intends to benefit other sentient beings, and then who is the teacher and who actually is the Sugata, the one going to please, and then who is the refuge or protector. And so with these lines, he wrote this praise to the Buddha called salutation, verse of salutation. So by this, what he's saying is that the Buddha is someone who actually showed the path to others as to what we need to cultivate within ourselves, to adopt as our path and cultivate them within ourselves, to overcome our delusions and the cognitive obscurations and so forth, and what are to be overcome or discarded, what should not be followed. And so, since he showed all these without any mistake, I mean, he becomes someone who is infallible teacher, and therefore he becomes an authoritative person because of being able to show these two, what are to be discarded and what are to be adopted without any mistake, and therefore he becomes an authoritative person and or a valid person. But then when you talk about a valid person, does someone become an authority in such way right from the beginning or not? And it's the answer is no. But he actually created or developed the path within himself to become an authoritative person. And the path that he developed is the altruism that he developed within himself to help all sentient beings. And therefore, he developed this understanding of emptiness as well as the development of bodhicitta within himself. Sugatha, and then also became an authoritative teacher and a protector to others.
Tindishilebe toane ta nyamne chajire towa. Sange di zumuzi shedigi da sanjebe chöse di po molo shana kuya chöse martas. Namu pöl di shumbure pöl ya 저는 이제 권유하러 메디시 러션들도 별이야. 아니 관바치 캠보치 야래. 그래서 캠보치 자가 미시용인 거래. 아니 미디다